Managing multiple clients or large websites? Automate your SEO with Ali AI. Start your free trial now.
Taylor Swift is a link builder. There were rumors that she would get engaged. Our client said, let's give them a free wedding venue. And then we got them 50 links. That's digital PR.
Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
I'm Will. I work at 43 Clicks North, which is an awesome agency up in Hull. And I write copy and content. And today, I'm going to be talking about The Princess Bride. So before I start, can I have a quick show of hands? Have you seen The Princess Bride? Excellent, that's a good amount of you. If you've seen it, you're going to appreciate the gifs and the references a lot more. If you haven't, it's fine. Everything else makes sense. You should watch it because it's brilliant. So why am I talking about The Princess Bride? Firstly, it was an excuse to watch it again. It's one of my favourite films. Secondly, it's almost infinitely gifable. And thirdly, probably most importantly, it's an absolute masterpiece of storytelling. So what does this have to do with writing better SEO content? What's storytelling got to do with that? Google doesn't want you to write SEO content. Google wants you to write for humans. They even say it on their website, people first content. So we've always communicated as humans with stories since we invented time, pretty much. So let's have a look at some storytelling tips from The Princess Bride. Number 1, too long, didn't read, TLDR. We all know what a TLDR is, right? Summed up your article real briefly, usually at the start. Apparently originated on Usenet in the early 2000s. I always thought it was Reddit. Apparently I was wrong. But the concept is much, much older. To give you an example, start of Romeo and Juliet, the very first monologue, the prologue, tells you what's going to happen in the entire play. It tells you that they're going to die at the end. Sorry, that's a spoiler if you haven't seen Romeo and Juliet. The Princess Bride, we are getting to that, I promise, also starts with a TLDR. So if you haven't seen it, the concept is it's a story within a story. The grandfather is reading a book to his grandson who's ill in bed. That story is The Princess Bride. The little boy's not that keen. He's like, The Princess Bride? That sounds like, that's not a fun book, that's not a boy book. So he gives us this TLDR. There's fencing, there's fighting, there's giants, there's miracles, to draw him in, to make him interested. Google loves a TLDR, and your readers love it too. It tells them exactly what they're going to get in your article or your content. It tells them if it's going to be worth their while reading further. Don't worry about giving too much away when you do a TLDR, because people want detail, they want the information. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And as a bonus, it's also a really good way for getting featured snippets. We all know featured snippets. Your TLDR at the start is basically a ready-made featured snippet for Google. If you do little mini TLDRs for all your sections in your content or your article, they're also perfect featured snippets. The Princess Bride does exactly the same thing when Inigo Montoya is explaining to Wesley, who is recently recovered from being mostly dead, what's happened in the last half hour of the film. So you need to base it on your keyword research, you need to be answering the questions that your audience are asking. Now my pro tip for TLDRs, and this might sound a little bit counterintuitive because they go to start, is write them last. But if you think about it, it's really difficult to summarize something that you haven't written yet. So save until the end, you'll find it a lot easier. I find it easier to jump into your content and start with the meaty stuff anyway. Tip number 2, loops. Now loops, another classic storytelling technique. So when you ask your reader a question or make a statement that makes them want to know more, that's opening a loop. You'll see it everywhere when you look for it in books, TV, films, any kind of media. And you want to do it in your title, your meta description, and in your TLDR, which Princess Bride does with the grandfather speaking to the grandson. But it doesn't stop there. When Wesley leaves Buttercup to go make his fortune, it opens a loop. When Buttercup is kidnapped, it opens a loop. The whole movie, like most stories, are loops within loops within loops. I did it with this taught title. I got Becky to do it when she did the introduction about me being naked in the gallery. If you want to find out about that, you're going to have to ask me, I'm afraid. It made you wonder, what on earth has The Princess Bride got to do with writing copy? What's it going to do? It makes you want to know more. And hopefully by the end of the talk, I'll have closed that loop off and I'll have answered that question. But there's a really important reason to use loops when you're writing. You probably do it anyway, but it's good to be aware that you're doing it. And that's because people are a lot less likely to leave your page when there's an open loop, because they want to know what happens next. There's a gap in their knowledge that they want to be filled. They can't just go away yet. And this is called the curiosity gap. Now, BuzzFeed do that brilliantly with their headlines. They use a very specific technique, which is basically this exact structure. They give you a little bit of information, but then you make you very aware that there's some more, there's some intrigue there, so you want to know more. Now, the trouble with BuzzFeed is usually you click on the actual link and the article is awful, and you read like this 1,000-word article like that has not done anything interesting whatsoever. That's clickbait. Don't do that. Make sure you deliver on the promise that you make in your loop. Close your loops at the end of your article, or you kind of end up making your readers feel a little bit dirty and grubby, and that's not the relationship you want to be building. Number 3, you want to know your audience. So if you're going to deliver what your audience wants and give them useful content, you need to know them. You need to understand them. You need to know what questions they're asking and what they want to know. Like the grandfather in The Princess Bride knows his grandson. He tailors the story to what the boy likes. And he does kind of bring him around to the stuff he's not interested by the end of the film. And you want to kind of do the same thing when you're writing. So you tailor it to your audience. And that sounds really obvious, but an awful lot of websites get it really, really wrong. So I want another show of hands. Have you ever been to a web page that is full of jargon and waffle, and it's all about the company, and it's not about you and what they can do for you? Yeah, that's most of you, I figured. Don't do that. It's awful. It's like the equivalent of verbal candy floss, except the candy floss tastes like cat food. You want to tell your audience what they want to know, not what you want to tell them. So answer the questions that they're asking. Be honest, and you'll start to build trust with them. And that's really important for Google with their EAT framework, which I'm not going to say the words because the A one I can never say right, let alone spell. But this is how you build trust with your audience and with Google. I'm going to talk a little bit more around that in the next tip. Show that you're an expert. So there's nothing worse than either reading an article that's fluffy and waffly, and you feel like you've just spent 5 minutes reading 1,000 words, and you've maybe got one little point, and that's it. Or even worse, to be fair, is something that's just wrong. So you need to do the complete opposite of that and show that you're an expert. So here's a few ways that you can demonstrate that in your copy. Firstly, you need to put the time in. Like Inigo Montoya, him again, he's the best bit of the film. He dedicated decades of his life learning to fence after the villain, Count Rugen, killed his father, so he could defeat him when he finally met him. You might not have to go to quite those lengths, but you do need to do your research. And this is a pain. I'm not going to lie, it takes time. And you can't blag it. There's no way around it. You have to put that time in if you want to create genuinely useful content. And that's what your readers want, and that's what Google wants. So it's essential. Be specific. I don't like the term marketing speak, but don't use it. Don't be vague and general. Get right down into the detail. If you're talking about a product, tell your users exactly how it's going to help them. Get right down into the detail about what it does, how it does it, why it's so good at doing it, why it's better than all the other things at doing it. And be specific with your numbers. So again, don't be general. Don't say we've helped thousands of people. It means nothing. It's no grounding. It doesn't do anything. Get specific. Tell them exactly how many clients you've helped, and tell them what you did as well. Specific, specific, specific. Do it with your calls to action. Banish the words click here from your website. Never use them. Destroy them. It doesn't matter if you've already said what you're saying in your call to action, in your copy. Tell them again. So then if people skimmed your copy, if they've just even skipped to the end, because I've definitely done that on websites, they know what they're getting. They know what to expect. They know what you want them to do. Be credible. Now, the last two kind of feed into this quite nicely. If you're being specific and you've done your research, you're going to come across as credible. But there's another kind of credibility tip that I really like. So another show of hands. Have you ever bought something off the internet, like a telly or a laptop that's quite expensive? Yeah, probably most of us. Keep your hand up. Now, keep your hand up if you didn't check any reviews or look at anything other than the page you bought it from? Yep, not many of you. We're all on the internet. We're all Googling. Your readers have probably found you by Googling. So if your product has any flaws or negatives, they already know about them. And if they don't, they're going to, because they're Googling. So own those flaws. Lead with them. Don't use rubbish, hyperbolic things that don't mean anything. Start with a negative. Tell them what your product doesn't do that they already know anyway. You're not giving away anything new. And the key word here is but. Tell them what it does do. It makes it a lot more easy for them to believe. Now, you need to be brave with this. You need to commit to it, and you need to be honest. And the hardest bit is probably convincing your clients to go with it. But it's really powerful. If you do it right, it can boost conversion. Now, something else that feeds really well into showing you that you're an expert is the language you use. Now, I could talk for ages about language and tone of voice. I'm definitely not going to, because Mel did it way better than I ever could. I'm just going to focus on one really key thing. And that's because you want to avoid things like this in your copy. When people are reading, if they hit a word that they don't understand, or a sentence that's hard to read, or even just a bad bit of visual design, it jars them out of their reading. It takes them out of that flow. And if you do that too many times, they'll just bounce. But it just disrupts. It's not a great thing to do. You want your words to flow like water down a water slide. So, make it easy to process. Now this, if you take one thing away from this talk, make it this. It's the biggest thing. It's the most important thing, I think, in the whole talk. Nobody wants to read long, hard, complex copy on the web, or possibly ever, but especially not on the web, when you're scrolling on your phone or sitting on your laptop or whatever it is. And remember, making it read complexly, which might not be a word, does not show that you're an expert. In fact, it pretty much does the opposite. Einstein once said, if you can't explain something to a 6-year-old, you don't really understand it. So how do you make something easy to process? Write in plain English. Use the simplest words you can do. Use simple sentences. And that doesn't necessarily mean short sentences. Your sentences have to flow. Using every sentence really short, it gets boring, it's not nice to read. So vary them, but the flow is really important. Short paragraphs are quite important, especially if your audience is on mobile, because a big wall of text is just awful to read. The NHS is a great example of writing in plain English. They talk about some pretty complex medical stuff and make it very, very easy to process. There are some brilliant websites for checking your readability. This one is absolutely my favorite because it uses popular text to rank your copy against. I usually like to aim somewhere between Brian Cox and Harry Potter. If I'm writing something that's really quite in-depth and complex, I might occasionally just dip into Pride and Prejudice. If you get to Paradise Lost, you've got real problems you're going to need to write. If you're beyond Paradise Lost, I can't help you. Now, tip number 6, which kind of follows quite nicely on from this one. Be concise. Now, the key here is, this is going to sound harsh, nobody wants to read your words, or my words, or anybody else's words, except maybe Mel's. They want an answer to the question that they're asking. They want some information, and they want it quickly. So make sure that your copy that you're writing isn't a barrier to them getting the information. Make it a conduit. Don't make it like a wedding that is dragging on too long when the Prince Humperdinck is trying to marry Princess Buttercup before Wesley can stage a daring rescue. That's the last thing you want. Get to the point. Say what your audience wants to know and say it quickly. Do remember though, concise does not have to mean short. If you've got a lot to say, if you've got a really complex product, or you've got something really in-depth to explain, you need words to do that, and that's absolutely fine. But every word on your page needs to be there for a reason. It needs to be earning its keep, which slightly contradicts the next tip, but I never said this was going to be simple. Repetition is a really powerful tool when you use it right. The Princess Bride, if you've seen it, you're probably nodding along at this point, uses repetition brilliantly. It's one of the reasons that it's so quotable and so gifable. And it's kind of the same reason that it's a great idea to do this when you're writing your copy. It makes it memorable and it makes it stick in people's minds, which is what you want to do. You want people to remember you for good reasons, hopefully. And people skim read. Not everybody. Some people read properly. I do. I'm a bit weird. But a lot of people will flick through your text. They'll read the headings. They'll look at the odd link or bold text or read the odd sentence. So your message, if you've only got it there once on your page, it can really easily get missed. And that's the last thing you want. So you need to repeat it. That doesn't mean just copying and pasting it repeatedly across your site and your page. That's duplicate content, not a great way to go. What you need to do is think of different ways to frame things, like if you're selling a product, the key benefits, the USPs, different ways you can talk about them so you can repeat them without really repeating them. And it doesn't want to be just on one page, because you never know where users are going to come onto your website. You don't know where they're going to go. You don't really know their user journey. They're all different. So spread it out through your website. Get that important message all over the place, because then people are going to pick it up. They're going to know what it is that you want to say. I know I said you should tell them what they want to say, but yeah, go with it. The only time when it's slightly different is when you're writing calls to action. When you're picking a call to action, pick one, stick with it. Don't give people loads of choice about what to do. And this could be as simple as having 2 phone numbers on your contact page. I don't know whether I'm supposed to ring the mobile or the landline. I'm probably not going to ring it at all. And when you've got, give us a call, send us an email, fill in a form, book a demo, book your free demo, buy now. It's overwhelmed, it's too much. One C call to action, and also it makes it much easier to measure whether something's working, which is great, because we all love testing stuff, right? So, repetition. This line is repeated a lot through The Princess Bride, for those of you that don't know. The first version is he's telling Wesley why he's going to say it. Him, Count Rugen. This scene is where he's finally met the villain, Count Rugen, who killed his father. And that leads us really nicely to our final tip. Have a villain in your writing. Now, I kind of saved my favourite bit to last here, because everybody loves a villain, right? Everybody loves to hate someone who's really despicable. When you go to Panto, the best bit is booing the baddie. Now, I'm going to do something that I suspect has never happened at Brighton SEO before. On the count of 3, I want you all to boo me. 1, 2, 3. That was actually worryingly good. I think you could do better, though. Let's try again. 1, 2, 3. This is getting depressingly good now. All right, now this time, I want you to spell boo these guys. 1, 2, 3. I think you actually booed me better, which is very upsetting. All right, it feels good though, doesn't it? Like that villain thing works. Now, The Princess Bride has brilliant villains. And like I said, you want one in your copy as well. Why do you want a villain in your copy? Well, when you're a marketer, we love talking about problems, right? We like talking about problems and how our wonderful products are going to solve those problems. The problem with problems is that more often than not, we're telling people that they're doing something wrong. Yeah? And it's not very nice to be told that you're doing something wrong, especially when you probably already know that you're doing something wrong, and that's why you search for it in the first place. So, flip it on its head, turn that problem into a villain. Kind of like this example. I'm not going to read it out. You can read it on the fridge. If you tell someone they're doing something wrong, not a great feeling. If you tell them that there's a villain picking on them, it makes them feel like they're part of something bigger. Lots of people are being picked on by this villain. And you can then make your products into the hero. If you're writing an informational page, you can give them the tools to defeat the villain themselves. It makes it a much more positive experience for everyone involved, which is lovely. It also echoes quite nicely the ending of the movie, when the villains are defeated, which is quite handy, because we have come to the end of the talk. Isn't that handy? Thank you ever so much for listening. I've had a blast, despite how much you booed me. I'd love to hear what you thought about it. I'd love to hear if you try any of this stuff. Look me up on LinkedIn with that big giant code there. Come and talk to me, drop me an email, whatever. Thank you.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.